to another edition of Off the Tube and AP European History Distance Learning. It is absolutely wonderful to be broadcasting to each and every one of you today, especially as we look at really kind of the stuff that we've been talking about for the last 2 weeks are finally going to come to a head, because we've been looking at the first part of the 19th century. We've been looking at from 1815 to essentially 1850, but really 1848, as that becomes kind of another explosive wave of revolution across Europe. The specter of the French Revolution keeps coming back to haunt those conservative monarchs that have been trying to put the pieces back together. And so as we look at the revolutions of 1848, it's important to remember kind of those general trends that we've been talking about this whole time. And that's at the start of our time period, we started by looking at those two kind of contradictory trends that were on a collision course with each other. On the one hand, you have the rise of conservatism. And this conservative backlash in order to try and pick up the pieces after the French Revolution and after Napoleon tranced around Europe, spouting ideas like the equality of man and individual liberties and popular sovereignty for all. As Napoleon and the French Revolution threatened to dismantle European society as Europe had known it, these conservative monarchs are trying to stop the bleeding, to put Europe back to the way it was, to return it back to that beautiful, peaceful, serene, traditional, aristocratic, feudal society that it was. And they're going to do that largely by strengthening the monarchies, by suppressing individual liberties, by trying to stop change in a lot of ways, at least socially and culturally throughout Europe. But the problem is that our second trend that is happening in the beginning of the 19th century is industrialization. Now, of course, in England, it had been happening since around 1750. So English society, especially, had been well industrialized by the time we get to 1815. By the time we get to 1830, 1850, I mean, England is going to be very well industrialized, and the rest of Europe is starting to catch up as well. And industrialization, as we've studied, is going to cause dramatic shifts in society, not just economically, but culturally, as you see the rise of those revolutionary ideas like liberalism and, oh my gosh, socialism and nationalism. I mean, all these revolutionary ideas are going to have major impacts in society. Now, of course, you have the economic shift, you have social shifts, as you have this new middle class gaining incredible amounts of wealth due to their control over businesses and global trade, and they're going to be asking and wanting more and more representation than in politics and in society. So industrialization is going to be undermining the conservative monarchies' attempts to try and create this, and recreate old feudal Europe. And so these frustrations are all going to come to a head in 1848. Now, of course, again, we all knew it's going to start in France. Those pesky French, they can just never just chill for just a little bit. So we see actually two revolutions happening in the beginning of the 19th century. We see a first revolution in 1830, Les Miserables, and then yet again after the failure of the Louis Philippe, the bourgeois monarch, the pear-shaped guy, the failure of Louis Philippe and his bourgeois government to try and really still keep up with the changes that are coming from industrialization. And so in 1848, you see yet another French Revolution. And that revolutionary sentiment is going to spread to the other conservative monarchies as well, especially for Prussia and Germany, especially as Germany is struggling with what is Germany? Who are we? And then in Austria, as the Austrian Habsburg Empire is realizing the stresses of having a multinational, multi-ethnic empire. How do you have this Germanic Austrian minority ruling over Hungarian, Croat, Slav? I mean, all of the different ethnicities within the Austrian Empire are going to start to clamor and want more representation in their governments. And so you also then see in Italy and in other places more revolts as well against Habsburg rule and conservative rule. So what this second supplemental assignment is supposed to do is it's supposed to have you look at, why did these revolutions happen? What is it that is causing it? And I want to be clear with you. This DBQ is one that I made. I think it's a really fun one to do, but it's also going to require you to make sure that you have your notes for Chapter 21 out and ready to go, because these documents are going to be difficult to understand if you don't have some of the historical context and outside evidence from the chapter. So let's just go into the instructions that I want you to do. So the DBQ is going to start out as it always does, and the DBQ is going to, I'm just going to turn this down off for a second. The DBQ, I want you to do steps 1 through 3 on your own. I want you to read through the directions, make sure you understand all those important things that the College Board would, if you were to write this, you're not going to, but if you were to write this, would be expecting you to do. I then want you to break down the prompt, analyze the prompt, and make sure you understand exactly what it is. I'm going to help you with this because it's a different type of prompt. This says to evaluate the various causes of the French Revolution. What this means is that you're going to be looking at a variety of different causes in these documents. You have to decide which one mostly caused the revolutions of 1848, and what are just somewhat causes of the revolutions of 1848. So there's going to be a variety of different ones that you're going to be seeing in these documents, and you are going to have to use the documents to decide and kind of rank what is it that really caused these, and what are just kind of somewhat secondary causes, or in some cases third causes, or fourth, whatever, however many you find. So you're going to be evaluating the causes of the French Revolution. I want you to, of course, brainstorm quickly. What are some of those possible things? Again, remember, you have those two contradictory trends that we've been talking about. You've got conservative monarchies trying to uphold a strict control over their populations, and then you also have all of the incredible changes that are happening because of industrialization. So think about how those impacts of industrialization would cause a rub against what the conservative monarchies were trying to do. Also, don't forget those revolutionary ideologies of liberalism, of socialism, and of nationalism. Then you're going to have to go through the documents, and you're going to go around the horn, go through step 4, going around the horn with all the documents. I'd like you for this one to actually practice giving yourself 15 minutes to do this. What that means is that I'm not going to be looking specifically, did you do every single hip and did you do all these things? I want you to practice going through this in 15 minutes. Time yourself. See if you can read through these documents and understand them, analyze them, and start to get your understandings of groupings in that 15 minutes. What that means is you may have to make some choices as to what you focus on. Now, I think doing the hip is very important, but I think the most important thing for all of the documents is to figure out how it answers the question and figure out how it relates to the other documents. So I want you to try to do as many of the hips as you can in that 15 minutes, but know that since you have 15 minutes, you might not be able to get through all of that. So I want you to at least have how it answers the question and how it relates to the other documents. Then I want you to, as many as you can, do outside information, but again, that's not as essential. As you go through, though, I'm going to ask that part of your analysis section is going to be giving me some outside evidence as well. So just know that I will be asking you for that as you go through. After you go through the documents, and you can see it goes all the way to document 7, I'm going to add another page after this, where I'm going to ask that you tell me your groupings. And I'm just going to insert here page break. This is what happens when you do things live. I'm going to ask you to give me your groupings. I'm going to ask you to group it in at least 3 ways, and I know that there are 3 ways in the documents because, again, I created this DBQ. I'm going to ask you to write me a thesis statement using your groupings. I'm going to ask you to, once again, choose 2 documents to use and to hip check. And then, like I said, I would like you to do a couple of things here. The first is I want you to give me at least 2 examples of outside evidence. from chapters 20 and 21. And then I would also like you to write me a synthesis. And the synthesis I want you to focus on for this assignment in particular is what the heck is happening in Great Britain and Russia. Because one of the really interesting things to talk about with the revolutions of 1848 is while they happen in France and in Central Europe, they don't happen in Great Britain and they don't happen in Russia. So why is it? So what is it that was happening in either of those places that would cause there not to be a revolution? How did Great Britain avoid it? How did Russia avoid it? And how does that relate to the causes that you found in your DBQ? So again, you're going to go through, this is practice for the AP exam, this is practice doing a DBQ. I want you to do steps 1 through 4 in 15 minutes. Give yourself a timer. Then I'd like you to do this last section here, your analysis, which would then be setting up the writing of the actual DBQ. Again, you're practicing so that you'll be able to do it on an exam for my class, but so also that you'll be able to do it for the AP exam. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. And also, you know what? Don't forget to like this video if you found it helpful, if you enjoyed it, if you liked my energy, enthusiasm, if you liked my mustache, whatever it is that you like. Don't forget, you're allowed to like these videos as well. I'm trying to build up my social media following here, and how am I ever going to make OptiTube a viral sensation without your help? So until next time, Optidol out.